Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Rude Homeless Dude Goes Away Hungry. I must admit I have a very aholish trait. I hate beggars with all my heart. I won't try to explain why, how, or if it is good or bad, just take it as the main trigger of the next situation. I was having lunch in this nice outdoors restaurant, eating a delicious steak, when a wild homeless guy appeared. Imagine a man in his late 30s, long hair, dirty beard, wearing an old camo jacket and sweatpants. My table was the closest one to the street, separated from it by a 1.5 meters distance and a low fence, so while the guy could not get physically close, he could call and speak to me. He starts saying how he is hungry and asks if could buy him another steak or share mine. I just ignore him, not even recognizing his presence, and continue with my meal. Obviously the guy didn't like that and swiftly changed his discourse into a full rant of how I am an a-hole and bla. And here comes the petty revenge. With about half of my steak left, I stood up, took the plate, and went directly to the guy, whose face showed a weird smirk. Maybe he thought his insults had made me change my mind. Poor dumb. I was looking directly into his eyes, at arm reach, when I suddenly whistled as loud as I could. See, I had been in the restaurant before and knew of a very special patron that was constantly lurking around, looking for scraps. As predicted, my call made Tito, the local street dog, a Doberman Labrador mix, appear out of nowhere. I rapidly threw the meat over the fence and into his jaws, looking with satisfaction how the beggar's smile turned into surprise, horror and rage in just mere seconds. Knowing the guy would try to spit on me or worse, I ran inside the main building as fast as I could, his curses and bad words following behind. From the windows I saw him waiting for about 10 minutes until finally giving up and going away. Was this petty? Yes, and a whole move? Totally. Do I regret it? Not at all. Did Tito like the steak? You bet he did. The next one is titled, Don't Mess with a Farmer. So for background, I am the son of a produce farmer. Where we ship and pack the products from are on the busiest road in our little town. Once a year in July is like a holiday for yard sales. Everyone has a tent put up with everything they want to get rid of. Many people like to buy things from this holiday yard sale and see our farm, with a huge empty space, and think it's free parking. It just so happens that July is the busiest month of our sweet corn sales. Every 10 minutes you will see a flatbed truck loaded with crates of sweet corn, or the huge tractor trailers getting loaded and heading to the store with our produce. The cars are constantly in our way and the idiots who park them like to walk around for many hours. The revenge. We try to be kind, but on this Saturday, we had a lot of corn coming in and out. Every truck was dodging the large assortment of cars. My father works in the office right next to the barns and loading dock, and was told by a truck driver for the 9th time that there were cars in the way. Fun fact, farms have tractors. A lot of really big tractors. My father was done with dealing with the cars for that day and took off in his truck. He came back a few minutes later with the biggest John Deere on our farm, 2-wheel dollies, and a chain. All 13 vehicles were towed away and behind the main corn storage barn. 7 SUVs, 2 pickup trucks, and 4 sedans. Later that day, as people were walking back to get lunch, the idiots saw their cars were gone. They walked into the office demanding to get their cars back. He took his sweet time getting each car back in the slowest gear on the tractor. Love you, Dad. The next one is titled, Friend Pranked My Grandpa with Fake Taxes in the 60s. My grandpa got even. This happened in the early to mid-60s or so. And when I heard it for the first time I nearly fell over laughing. My grandpa was a really hard worker and family man. He drove something like an old Chevy Impala back then. Grandpa had a really close friend who had worked with him on many of his jobs over the years. And so this guy knew everything about him. He will be henceforth known as Fred. Then one day Grandpa gets a phone call out of the blue on a weekend by someone saying they were from the IRS. This person knew all of his past work history in such meticulous detail and explained that Grandpa owed an extra $600 in unpaid taxes from over a 4-year span. Grandpa was understandably sweating bullets as this was a lot of money back then, and asking how he could have missed something like that. Then Fred revealed it was him on the phone all along. He'd placed a cloth over the phone receiver and spoke with an accent to disguise his voice. Grandpa was understandably upset but laughed it off. Because my grandpa never really got mad back then. He got even. Back then Grandpa was quite the prankster. And if anyone pranked him, he pranked them back twice as good. He knew just as much about Fred as Fred knew about him. Fred liked to drive fast everywhere. I think he drove an old T-Bird or something. He was the cocky type person who acted like he always knew where the cops were, and could slow down before they can tag him for speeding. Well, Grandpa knew the exact route Fred took home from work every day. And at the time of the year this happened, it was getting dark fast. Grandpa then took a light of some sort and painted half of it black so it could not shine through the other side. Then he rigged it up so his car dash could power it. He then waited in a driveway along the road with his engine idling till Fred came blaring by in his T-Bird. That's when Grandpa peeled out after him. And since police used Impalas back then, Grandpa's car looked just like a police cruiser in the dark. Grandpa then held up the light he'd painted black on one side and began turning it back and forth so it looked like a rotating police light. Fred understandably freaked out because he thought it was a real cop and pulled over. And now he was the one sweating bullets. Grandpa ran up to Fred's T-Bird in the dark and threw open the driver's side door, then ripped him out of his seat by his arm like a ragdoll while saying, "I gotcha." Fred was in such panic because he didn't know what was happening so much that he was just laying on the ground imitating a goldfish for a minute before his heart finally settled down enough and he let out a loud gasp. And when he realized it was Grandpa the whole time, he laughed it off and said he thought he was being robbed or kidnapped. But I'd say he learned a valuable lesson over who and how he pranks someone. I later had my grandfather tell this story to one of my friends. And he thought it was absolutely hilarious too. The next one is titled, "Commit Insurance Fraud? Go to jail and end up in a terrible financial situation." A long time ago and not far down the street from here, my girlfriends and I were cruising up and down the main thoroughfare of our city as teenagers that have just gotten their first cars tend to do. This is the main drag through the heart of our city, and it's where everyone would race on Friday and Saturday nights, kill time cruising before a movie, or just to hang out and be seen. We're driving along on a beautiful Friday afternoon when from the back seat, I spot a horde of teenage boys in a parking lot waiting for traffic to clear, so they can race. They've parked their crotch rockets and cars like they're for sale, every door open, hoods up, underglow shining, speakers blasting. And like half of these guys have their shirts off. Being a red-blooded teenage girl, I shout, "Oh my God, Kirsten, look." But Kirsten was driving the car. To this day, we both try to take the blame for this because I should not have shouted for her to look, and she should not have turned around to look. So, of course, we rear-ended the car in front of us at about 15 miles per hour. Not bad at all. We got out, and Kirsten and Sarah called their moms from the parking lot, and I called the police while checking on the people in the other car. The passenger jumped out and pointed at me, tells me to stay away, then went to the payphone. Yes, this happened that long ago, at the fast food joint we were in front of. I peeked into the car to ask the driver if they're okay. She was leaned all the way back in her seat, she wouldn't look at me, but she said she couldn't feel her arms. So, I'm like, oh crap. Hey dispatch, send an ambulance too. This lady says she can't feel her arms, and then I started freaking out. Did we just paralyze some poor woman because we're dumb, hormonal sluts? Oh God, we just ruined somebody's life. I'm asking the driver if there's anything I can do. I think I actually asked if I could make her more comfortable. I was panicked and just repeating the dispatcher at that point, "Don't worry, the ambulance will be here soon." And then she turned her head towards me and asked who hit her. I was confused and asked her what she meant. She wanted to know which one of us was driving. But I didn't want to tell her for some reason. I was just like, no, don't worry about that. "You'll be fine," and she wasn't having it. She got upset and started screaming at me to tell her who was driving. So, I just screamed back that she was crazy, and I wasn't going to tell her anything. And then the dispatcher says, "Miss, please just back away from the vehicle." Swear to God that dispatcher was psychic or something, because I ducked out of the car right as the driver swung her meaty fist at my head. And then it was on. She ripped off her seatbelt, ho, not paralyzed after all, and launched out of the car, running around the rear end to come at me. So, I ran screaming around the front end. Straight out of a cartoon, she turned around and ran around the other side of the car, making me turn around to run the opposite way, back and forth around the front and back of the car until she committed to a side, and I just ducking ran the other way to the parking lot. Kirsten was banging on the door of the fast food joint, but an employee was holding the door closed and shaking her head. I will never forget that poor woman's face. Sarah was on the phone crying. I could hear the sirens in the distance, and dispatch was entirely too calm, asking me to explain the problem. On the 911 recording, you can just hear me panting, "What the crap, what the crap, what the crap," with every exhale. You guys, this woman was short, stout, and she ran like a ducking juiced up bull. She was so fast. I could feel her catching up to me, so I pivoted to the side, and she whooshed past me. And she continued right towards Sarah, clotheslined her as she ran by, and headed to Kirsten, who at this point had seen the writing on the wall and was running away. But there wasn't really anywhere to go except for the entrance of the drive-through. So, Kirsten and the enraged driver disappeared around the back of the building. I was picking Sarah up off the ground when an ambulance, fire truck, and 2 police cruisers pulled up. EMT popped out first, and we ran at him screaming nonsense about a crazy lady and the drive-through. And then Kirsten came flying around the far corner of the building with beast mode right on her heels. I've never seen somebody stop so fast. She came out around the corner, saw all the emergency responders, stopped, and dropped like a fallen tree before pretending to shake uncontrollably. This lady tried to pull a fake seizure right in front of the EMTs and police. Her friend, the passenger, who had been on the payphone this whole time, dropped down next to her and started wailing that somebody needed to do something and help her and arrest us. Really coming hard with the dramatics. So, the EMTs loaded her up, and they went off to the hospital while the 3 of us gave our statements to the police. And we assumed that was the end. Insurance was supposed to deal with anything else, right? First, the driver tried to sue all 3 of us and the insurance company. Pain, suffering, medical bills, loss of income, the whole works. She claimed that after rear-ending her, I dragged her out of her car, and Kirsten was actually chasing her through the drive-through. The 911 recording disproved her claim of being pulled from the vehicle, and CCTV footage from the fast food restaurant showed her as the pursuer. The suit was eventually dismissed, and she had to pay our lawyers' fees, which really sucked for her because Sarah's lawyer got photos of her frolicking at a music festival when she was supposedly suffering from whiplash, double knee injuries, and constant dizziness. Boom, that's insurance fraud. She spent a year in jail and paid a hefty fine. And we assumed that was the end. But no. A few months after she was released, we all began to find dead animals left on our front porches, in our mailboxes, in the swimming pool, hung over the side mirror of the car, etc. Definitely some unusual places to find dead animals. The phone calls started, hang-ups, faxes, random screaming. Kirsten swore she saw a car following her between school and the coffee house. Sarah thought she saw a similar car in her neighborhood a few times. We all knew who was doing it, but the cops couldn't really do anything without proof. Our parents were upset because this was the dawn of the digital era, and we all had cell phones, but crazy driver lady was blowing up the landline, and it was harassing our parents more than us. And the dead animals were terrifying our siblings. So, Kirsten's mum bought a guard dog, and the next time somebody dropped a dead raccoon in their petunias, Duke was gonna give them what for. So, everyone in Kirsten's house was sitting back enjoying a little TV one night when a noise was heard in the bushes right before a dead squirrel was hurled through the open window. And Duke leaped right out the window and tackled crazy ducking driver lady in the goddamn petunias. She had dressed in all black, ski mask, gloves, and everything. Literally the uniform of the nefarious. Kirsten said Duke had her whole shoulder in his big mouth and was pinning her down while they called the police. She was hauled off to jail while the cops searched her car found down the road. They found drugs, stolen credit cards, pills, a knife, trash bags, and cleaning supplies. To get her to plea to a whole slew of lesser charges, the prosecutor threatened to pursue kidnapping charges even though it was a real stretch. She ended up being sentenced to 5 years, served 3. Thankfully, none of us have heard from her since. But it took over a decade for her to pay us off. The crazy thing is, she's got money. She just refused to make payments, so the court started taking it out of her tax returns and depositing it on debit cards they gave us. The last one is titled, Ream Me Out for No Reason? How do you like this? I work as an electrician. I had done so for over a year before leaving the state for a few months to sort out some family things. Once I returned home I got my old job back. By the time I had returned to the company they had grown quite a bit. Lots of new faces and lots of new a-holes to avoid. So the first day came and I arrived on time. Also note I spoke to the owner of the company. Good friend and asked him what I should bring for the day's work. No reply. My own fault, I came unprepared and underdressed because I wasn't given a uniform yet. But anyway, as I pull up to the job I realize I'm the first one there. So I wait in my car listening to some music while eating my breakfast. Now the jobs normally start at 7 a.m. sharp. 8 o'clock finally rolls around and I see someone with the company attire. I go up to him and introduce myself. He turns out to be a friendly guy named Hector. Me, hey my name, I'll be starting work with you guys today, nice to meet you. Hector, hey. Yeah, we were told you were coming, do you have any tools with you? Me, a few hand tools. I want given a tool list by boss. I tried to ask but got no reply, my bad. Hector, no problem. Do you know how to wire up fluorescent lights? Me, sure do. Hector, perfect, let's get you started on that. So I was going about my business wiring up all the fluorescent lights that have been put up, minding my own headphones in, and nose to the grindstone. Enter Jesse, the self-righteous supervisor. So there I am doing my job, and quite efficiently too I might add, when Jesse seemingly sneaks over to me, jumps on the side of the lift I'm currently working on, which breaks the Oasis codes by the way, and pulls the headphones out of my ears, which obviously hurt and was quite surprising. He begins to talk and things go like this. Jesse, first off, what the duck are you doing? Second, what the duck are you wearing? And thirdly, who the duck told you to do this? I was shocked and told him it was my first day back with the company. I hadn't gotten my uniform yet so I had to come in simple clothes. I explained that I wasn't told what tools I would need so that's why I was unprepared. He proceeds to tell me to get down off the lift. I do. At the same time, the GC, general contractor, for the whole job walks in, nice guy. As I'm getting my butt chewed out for being unprepared, he sees the GC and gestures him to come over. He does. As he arrives, the SRS starts to insult me in front of him, saying how unprofessional I looked and how stupid I must have been for coming in like this. At this point the GC looks quite uncomfortable. The GC makes an excuse to leave the conversation, but not before Jesse gets off. One more thing. Jesse, anyway, I'll fix this issue right now. He turns to me and says, get the duck off my job site and come back when you're an actual worker. So I did. I called up my boss and he then chewed SRS out. I rolled back up to the job a few minutes later, happy to see Hector smiling to see me back. I was left alone for most of the day, but as the week progressed things would get worse and worse. At one point he came in furious, not particularly at me just because he's an absolute duck face with zero patience. Anyway, he comes in with a large tool bag with lots of random things, then he stops looking at me. He then throws the bag at the floor, spilling everything all over a floor I just swept, turns back to me and says, Jesse, clean it up. I was dumbfounded standing there with my jaw open. He walks away with not a single duck given. I turn to Hector and he's just looking at me shocked as well. That was the last straw for me. I'm a good worker and I do my job well. I work overtime constantly and do not need this kind of treatment, so I decided to make myself feel better about my job situation by screwing with Jesse as much as possible. So for the next week, I would take small tools or parts he was using while walking away and throw them into the work trailer. As this kept happening, and since he had no idea where his tools were going, he was buying new screwdrivers, it seemed like every day. On top of that, he began to steal spools of wire off the job and put into his truck to resell. I took pictures of him doing so and saved them for later. Also got a few videos of him nearly attacking other companies' workers for being too loud with the Mexican music. So Friday finally rolls along and it's main feed day. Now if you don't know about how underground electric works, you might not fully grasp how difficult it is to pull by yourself. It's very hard. The wires arrive 6 hours late. We start pulling at 2 AM. We were supposed to be off at 2 today with full 8-hour pay. We worked late that day. As everything gets put on rollers and the feeds get lead, I see Jesse standing by the pulley doing nothing but waiting for me to get everything ready. I don't say anything and just do it. Now he has an electric pulley powered by a small remote. Now I on the other end is pushing in all this 600 wire. The spools are bigger than me and over 1,500 pounds each. After over 3 hours of me nearly killing myself with no brakes because he wouldn't take his damn hand off the button. Eventually, he walks over to me to complain about how slow I was at feeding it to him. I told him it would have helped me, it could have gone faster. No. Likely. Jesse, are you seriously suggesting that I help you with your job? What are you good for if you can't even do the one job I give you? It's not hard, just feed the ducking wire, you dumb idiot. I was furious. I took a deep breath and simply took it on the chin. Sorta. Kinda. Not really. As he was going over back to his truck, he was walking by the wire spools when he slipped on some wet cardboard I had been using to put my knees on, causing him to slip and fall into the spool and hit the large bolts attached to the side. I could visibly see that his shoulder was out of place. Ouch. I felt no pity. Seeing him wriggle on the floor in pain for a few seconds before helping him back up was very satisfying. Got him in his truck and he left, probably to the doctors, I'm guessing. After the week was over, I drove over to the management office to speak with my boss. I told him about how Jesse has been treating me, the other employees, others, and even the GC, constantly giving everyone crap about anything he could. He was not happy and told me he would look into the matter. A few days later, I found out he was trying to sue the company for his arm getting hurt on the job, saying he was hurt by all the wire I pulled in, like I had some impact on his lack of balance. My boss came back at him with the evidence of him stealing from the company and nearly costing him jobs. He dropped the idea of suing and was fired the next day. I got a raise. Thanks for listening.